the Trojan War. So apparently the entire ancient world went to war, because one dude couldn't keep it in his pants. Paris, a Trojan prince, decided that Helen, the wife of a Greek king, was too hot to ignore and just took her to Troy. Which, in retrospect, was a terrible idea because the Greeks showed up with literally 1,000 ships and said, "We're getting her back, and we're burning your city to the ground while we're at it." This war lasted 10 years. 10 years over one woman. The Greeks finally won by building a giant wooden horse, hiding soldiers inside it, and convincing the Trojans it was a gift. The Trojans, demonstrating the critical thinking skills of a toddler, wielded it inside their walls. That night, the Greeks popped out, opened the gates, and massacred everyone. The phrase, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts," exists because of this. Troy was destroyed so thoroughly that people thought it was just a myth until archaeologists found it in the 1870s. The Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta looked at each other around 431 BC and decided they couldn't both exist in the same Greece. Athens had the navy, the money, and the democracy. Sparta had super soldiers who trained from birth to kill people. This seemed like a fair matchup. It wasn't. The war lasted 27 years and destroyed both city-states. Athens tried to flex by invading Sicily in 415 BC, which went so badly that they lost 200 ships and 40,000 men. Sparta eventually won by making a deal with Persia, Athens' mortal enemy, which is like winning a fight by asking your opponent's bully for help. Athens fell in 404 BC, and Greek civilization never quite recovered. Great job, everyone. The Punic Wars. Rome and Carthage really hated each other. We're talking 3 separate wars over 118 years of pure Mediterranean beef. The First Punic War was about Sicily. Rome won. The Second Punic War gave us Hannibal Barca, who is still considered one of history's greatest military commanders despite losing. Hannibal decided the best way to attack Rome was to march an army, including 37 war elephants, over the Alps. In winter. He lost most of the elephants, but the absolute madman made it to Italy and spent 15 years running circles around Roman armies. At the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, he killed 50,000 Romans in a single day using a double envelopment tactic that's still studied in military academies today. But here's the thing about Rome. They don't quit, ever. They lost battle after battle and just kept recruiting new armies. Eventually, they took the fight to Carthage itself. Hannibal had to return to defend his homeland and lost at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. Rome wasn't satisfied with just winning. In the Third Punic War, they completely annihilated Carthage, killed or enslaved everyone, and allegedly salted the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. When Rome wins forever. The Mongol conquests. In 1206, Genghis Khan unified the Mongolian tribes and decided that the rest of the world looked pretty conquerable. And he was right. The Mongols built the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Korea to Eastern Europe. They killed an estimated 40 million people, which was about 11% of the world's population at the time. The Mongol military strategy was simple: show up, demand surrender, and if they say no, kill absolutely everyone and burn everything to the ground as a warning to the next city. It was effective. Most cities surrendered immediately. The siege of Baghdad in 1258 by Hulagu Khan killed up to 1 million people and destroyed the House of Wisdom, basically the Library of Alexandria of the Islamic world. Centuries of knowledge gone because one guy wanted to prove a point. The Mongols were so destructive that they accidentally caused global cooling. They killed so many farmers and destroyed so many cities that forests grew back and absorbed enough CO2 to drop global temperatures. Imagine being so good at war that you reverse climate change. The 100 Years' War. This war lasted 116 years, so we're already starting with false advertising. From 1337 to 1453, England and France beat the hell out of each other because English kings thought they should also rule France. The French disagreed, which is understandable. England had the longbow, which could punch through armor at 200 yards and turned French knights into pincushions. The Battle of Agincourt in 1415 saw 6,000 English archers defeat 20,000 French soldiers. The French kept charging into arrow storms like they had a death wish. This war also gave us Joan of Arc, a teenage girl who heard voices telling her to save France. She did, led several military victories, then got captured by the English and burned at the stake for heresy at age 19. Thanks, England. The war ended with France winning and England losing all its French territories except Calais. All that death, all that money spent, all those arrows fired, and England got basically nothing out of it except some really awkward family reunions because their royal families were related. The 30 Years' War. You know what's a great reason to fight a war? Religion. Just kidding, it's the worst reason, but that didn't stop Catholic and Protestant states from murdering each other for 3 decades starting in 1618. This war was so brutal that it killed 8 million people, about 20% of the German population. Entire regions were depopulated. Mercenary armies roamed the countryside like locusts, pillaging everything because they often weren't even getting paid. They had to loot to survive, which meant civilians suffered horribly. Famine and disease killed more people than actual combat. By the end, some German states had lost 50% of their population. The war ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, which established the modern concept of national sovereignty, and basically said, maybe we should stop killing each other over whose interpretation of Christianity is correct. Revolutionary thinking right there. The English Civil War. In 1642, King Charles I and Parliament looked at each other and decided to fight it out over who actually ran England. This was a big question, because Charles believed in the divine right of kings, meaning God made him king and therefore he could do whatever he wanted. Parliament disagreed and had guns, so that became a problem. The war lasted 9 years, killed about 200,000 people, and ended with Charles losing his head. Literally, they executed him in 1649, which was kind of a big deal because you're not supposed to kill kings. Oliver Cromwell took over, banned Christmas and fun in general, died. And then everyone decided monarchy wasn't so bad after all. They brought Charles's son back as King Charles II in 1660. All that fighting to end up right back where they started, minus one king's head. The 7 Years' War. Winston Churchill called this the First World War because it was fought on 5 continents from 1756 to 1763. It started in Europe over Silesia, spread to North America where it was called the French and Indian War, and somehow ended up involving everyone. Britain and France were the main combatants, and they fought everywhere they had colonies, which was basically everywhere. The war cost so much money that Britain decided to tax the American colonies to pay for it. The Americans disagreed with this plan, which led directly to the American Revolution, so this war caused the next war. Efficiency. Britain won and took Canada from France, but the debt from the war destroyed their relationship with the American colonies. France lost most of its colonial empire and went bankrupt, which contributed to the French Revolution 26 years later. Everyone who fought this war ended up worse off, but at least they had fun fighting it. The American Revolution. In 1775, American colonists decided they were done with British rule and their stupid taxes on tea. Britain sent troops to put down what they thought was a minor rebellion. Plot twist: it wasn't minor. The Americans had several advantages. First, they were fighting on home turf. Second, they had George Washington, who lost more battles than he won but had the superpower of refusing to give up. Third, France jumped in to help in 1778 because they hated Britain more than they cared about monarchy. France sent money, ships and troops, which turned the tide. The war ended in 1783 with American independence. Britain lost its most valuable colonies. France went even more bankrupt helping America, which directly led to the French Revolution in 1789. And America got to start its grand experiment in democracy, which is still ongoing and somehow getting weirder every year. The Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon Bonaparte looked at France in 1799 and decided he should be in charge. Then he looked at Europe and decided the same thing. From 1803 to 1815, Napoleon fought basically everyone, and for a while he was winning. Napoleon's tactics revolutionized warfare. He moved fast, hit hard, and used artillery like a scalpel. The Battle of Austerlitz in 1805 is considered his masterpiece. He defeated a combined Russian and Austrian army that outnumbered him using brilliant deception and terrain advantage. But Napoleon made two critical mistakes. First, he invaded Spain in 1808, which turned into a guerrilla war nightmare that drained French resources for 6 years. Second, and more importantly, he invaded Russia in 1812 with 600,000 men. He took Moscow, but the Russians had burned it before retreating. Napoleon had to retreat in winter with no supplies. He came back with 100,000 men. The other 500,000 died or deserted. Napoleon was defeated at Leipzig in 1813, exiled to Elba, escaped, returned for the 100 Days, and was finally crushed at Waterloo in 1815. They exiled him to St. Helena, a rock in the middle of the South Atlantic, where he died in 1821. The wars he started killed 3 to 6 million people and rearranged Europe completely. The American Civil War. In 1861, the United States split in half because the South wanted to keep owning people, and the North said no. The South fired first at Fort Sumter, which started the bloodiest war in American history. This war killed 620,000 to 750,000 Americans, more than all other American wars combined until Vietnam. The Battle of Gettysburg alone had 51,000 casualties in 3 days. The South was outnumbered, outgunned, and outproduced, but they had better generals initially and the advantage of fighting defensive battles on home territory. General William Tecumseh Sherman ended the romantic notion of war forever with his march to the sea in 1864. He burned Atlanta and carved a 60-mile-wide path of destruction through Georgia, destroying not just military targets but the economic capacity to wage war. Total war had arrived. The war ended in 1865 with the South destroyed and slavery abolished. President Lincoln was assassinated 5 days after the war ended. Reconstruction was botched so badly that we're still dealing with the consequences. The South lost the war but won the narrative for decades, which is its own kind of tragedy. World War I. In 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, and somehow that meant millions of young men had to die in trenches. The alliance system turned a regional conflict into a global catastrophe. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized to help Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia and France. Germany invaded Belgium to get to France. Britain declared war on Germany for violating Belgian neutrality. Everyone piled in. The Western Front became a 400-mile line of trenches from the English Channel to Switzerland, and nobody could break through. They tried everything: gas attacks, flamethrowers, tanks, and artillery barrages that lasted weeks. Nothing worked. The Battle of the Somme killed over 1 million people for minimal territorial gain. On the first day alone, Britain took 60,000 casualties, with 20,000 dead. The war introduced chemical weapons, machine guns, and the realization that modern industrial warfare was an efficient way to turn an entire generation into corpses. It ended in 1918 after killing 15 to 22 million people. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany so harshly that it directly caused World War II. Great job, everyone, World War II. This one's the big one. the deadliest conflict in human history, killing 70 to 85 million people, which was 3% of the world's population. It started in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland, and it ended in 1945 with nuclear weapons, and the world permanently changed. Adolf Hitler wanted to conquer Europe and exterminate everyone he deemed inferior. The Nazi regime implemented the Holocaust, systematically murdering 6 million Jews plus millions of others. It's the darkest chapter in human history, industrial-scale genocide that shocks us even today. Hitler's Germany conquered most of Europe in 2 years through blitzkrieg tactics, fast-moving armored divisions supported by aircraft, overwhelming defenders before they could react. France fell in 6 weeks. Then Hitler made the same mistake as Napoleon and invaded the Soviet Union in 1941 with Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in military history. The Eastern Front was hell on earth. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted 5 months and killed 2 million people. The Siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days and killed 1.5 million. The Soviets lost 27 million people total, more than any other country, but they ground the German army into dust through sheer attrition. Meanwhile, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, bringing America into the war. The Pacific Theater was equally brutal, with island-hopping campaigns and fanatical Japanese resistance. The war ended with America dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 200,000 people instantly and ushering in the nuclear age. The Korean War. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and the Cold War turned hot. The United Nations, led by America, intervened to stop communist expansion. China sent 1 million troops to help North Korea. The war stalemated roughly where it started, and an armistice was signed in 1953. Here's the kicker. Technically, the war never ended. They signed an armistice, not a peace treaty. North and South Korea are still at war 70 years later. The war killed 2.5 to 3 million people and accomplished basically nothing except maintaining the status quo. The Korean peninsula is still divided, and North Korea is still ruled by the same family that started the war, the Vietnam War. America decided to fight communism in Southeast Asia based on the domino theory. If Vietnam falls, all of Asia follows. This theory was wrong, but America committed anyway, sending 2.7 million troops between 1965 and 1973. The Viet Cong used guerrilla tactics, tunnel systems, and knowledge of the terrain to counter American firepower. The U.S. dropped more bombs on Vietnam than were used in all of World War II. They used Agent Orange, napalm, and carpet bombing. They killed 1 to 3 million Vietnamese, and they still lost. The war ended in 1975 with the fall of Saigon. Vietnam was reunified under communist rule, and the dominoes didn't fall. America learned that superior technology and firepower don't guarantee victory, especially when you're fighting people who are willing to die for their country while your troops are wondering why they're even there. The war destroyed American trust in government and ended the draft. The Gulf War. In 1990, Iraq's Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait over oil disputes and debt. The United Nations said no, and a coalition of 35 countries led by the United States kicked Iraq out in 1991. This war lasted 42 days of aerial bombardment, followed by 100 hours of ground combat. It was the most one-sided war in modern history. Coalition forces had GPS, precision-guided munitions, stealth aircraft, and night vision. Iraq had Soviet-era equipment and terrible leadership. The highway of death outside Kuwait City became a graveyard of destroyed Iraqi vehicles fleeing coalition airstrikes. The war accomplished its objective of liberating Kuwait, but left Saddam in power, which led to another war 12 years later. The Gulf War demonstrated American military supremacy and changed warfare forever through the use of technology. So there you have it. Thousands of years of humans killing each other over territory, resources, ideology, religion, or just because some guy got offended. We've fought wars over women, trade routes, succession disputes, and whose god is better. We've killed hundreds of millions of people, destroyed countless civilizations, and learned absolutely nothing. But you, at least, you're alive. So drop a comment and tell me what video topic you want to see next. Until then, take care.